Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Dragalia Lost. This is going to be a raid boss breakdown on Valfarre. I'm going to break it up into two main parts. The first part will cover Valfarre's moveset, and then the second part I will be showing you guys my 90-second challenge playthrough, and I'll also share any tips I have. But before we begin, let's briefly go over the most important prep info for squad raids. Most of you guys already know this, but for those that are new to the game, please remember to use at least 3 shapeshift prep worm prints on your team. If your squad has enough of these worm prints to reach at least 50% shapeshift prep, then everyone is able to transform into a dragon right away off the bat, so that's going to help with DPS tremendously. That's all I have to say for that. Next, let's talk about Valfarre's limbs. He's got his 2 arms, the right and the left, then he has his tail. Your team's priority should be breaking his arms. It doesn't matter which arm you break first, breaking either one will end up with the same result, which is making some of his moves weaker, and I'll talk more about it when I get into his moveset. The tail you should definitely break last. I don't believe breaking it affects any of his moves. However, if you break his tail, then there's a really small chance to obtain a golden key fragment, so that's something to keep in mind. I will say that if you can easily beat beginner and standard mode, then for those 2 modes you should break the tail first. He's really easy to take down in those 2 modes, so if you have a decently trained up team, there's really no point in breaking any of his arms. Just go after his tail first for the chance to obtain those golden key fragments. In expert and special mode is where you should always focus on both his arms first, then tail second. Alright, now with that over with, let's talk about his moves. First is Savage Press. This is the move that he always does in the beginning of the fight in expert mode. There's 3 purple circles that appear on the stage, 1 big circle and 2 smaller circles. The big purple circle is where his body will land, and the smaller circles are for his arms. With that being said, if you break his arms, then the smaller circles will disappear accordingly. So basically, break his arms in order to reduce Savage Press's target area. Next is Claw Crash. This is a cool looking move. It's like a checkered pattern attack. It has 2 phases to it, and it's a checkered pattern both times, but when he does it a second time, the positioning is different, so you'll have to dodge roll after the first phase. This move doesn't really bother ranged characters since they can attack from the safe spots. On the other hand, melees might be out of range sometimes depending on which safe spot you decide to land on, which is why I would recommend taking a ranged wind character for this fight, but it's not required. This is another one of his moves that gets weakened by breaking his arms. Each arm that you break will reduce the amount of lines in his Claw Crash attack, so this is really important if you're trying to go for a deathless run. Next is Phantasmal Wolves. This is similar to what Sabnik did in the previous squad raid. There's like these rings that appear on stage, and the rings will inflict bog to any character that makes contact with them, so I would recommend bringing wind characters with bog resistance if you can. If you don't have any characters like that, then don't worry about it, it's not required. Phantasmal Wolves is also kind of like a 2-phase attack. It starts with 3 rings, then after it goes off, there's 2 additional rings and a small circle that will appear. It's a little bit difficult to dodge it since there's not much room to work with, so it's likely that you end up taking 1 or 2 hits, but once you play the raid enough, you'll figure out how to optimally get into the safe spots. And I believe that's all for his moves, at least for the important ones. So now I'm going to show you guys my 90-second challenge playthrough. I can't really make a guide for this because honestly, these 90-second challenges have very little strategy to it. In order to beat it, it mainly depends on how invested your wind characters are as well as your buildings, but I would recommend using a wind character probably around 1.3k strength, I would say. If you are using an off element character, then I would say use someone around 1.8k or 1.9k minimum to 2k strength. Maribel is going to be your best friend for the squad raid. She's amazing and does a lot of damage, so try to find Maribel players if you can. Now for the fight, he starts out the match with a purple cone coming out of his crotch. When that cone fills up, he's going to spray water from right to left from the player's point of view. It does a lot of damage if you get hit by it, so try your best to avoid it. I would suggest running your character towards one of his arms right in the beginning of the match. Once you know that you are out of the cone's range, then that's when you can start casting your skills. As for which arm should you focus on first, I'm not entirely sure. Some players will tell you to go for the left, some players will tell you the right. Honestly, it doesn't matter if you're playing with an actual party, just make sure that you focus on one arm first. If you're playing with randoms, then I would just go for whichever arm that is closest to you. If you notice that the other 3 players are attacking the other arm, then switch to that arm if you can, but don't go out of your way to do it. You don't want to miss out on DPS, so don't force yourself to run from one side to the other just to attack the other arm. Other than that, the fight is basically break one arm, break the other, then break the tail with some overdrives in between. The limb breaks and the overdrives will interrupt some of his key moves, so it's kind of important that you have a strong enough team that can deal enough damage in time. One last thing that I want to mention is that you don't have to break his tail if you don't want to. Breaking it can interrupt one of his moves and make him stumble for a few seconds, but sometimes the tail is hard to reach, so you might end up chasing it a lot, which equals a loss of damage. So if your squad is just meeting the minimum in terms of damage, then you can break his 2 arms, skip the tail, and then just focus on the body instead. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this raid boss. If you have any questions, then you can ask me in the comments, in my Discord, or on Twitter. Good luck with the raid, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.